Now, what about this inflation news? It's going down. Will it win the Conservatives your vote? Are you thinking, as Rishi Sunak says, we're turning a corner? 0207 862 2222. We'd love to hear from you. So I'll show you a graph in just a second. It's gone down. Let's just take a look at this. It's gone down to 2%, right? The lowest it has been in 3 years. So it means that prices are still rising. Here we go. So, yes, crucially, it doesn't mean prices are coming down. It means that they're not rising as fast. So they're stuck at the high levels they were at. If we go back here, this is pre-Brexit. We were very low inflation there in the mid-2010s. The Bank of England target is 2%. I'm not connecting it with Brexit. There's all kinds of stuff going on, but it did then increase inflation. It went above the Bank of England target. And then we had that hurly-burly, do you remember, of the John Bercow Parliament and all kinds of instability. Then we had COVID there, March 2020. And then 2 years later, the war in Ukraine. And the combination of COVID reopening after the end of the pandemic and the war in Ukraine meant there was a scarcity of supply and a lot of demand, and the demand went through the roof. And we went up to 11% inflation, and particularly that was heating costs, heating and lighting. So now they've finally driven it down, partly by using interest rates. I know the government is taking credit. It's the Bank of England that controls interest rates. I mean, that's the funny thing, Albie, isn't it? That why would Rishi Sunak take credit for this?
Inflation is back at 2%. Just rejoice at that news, as Margaret Thatcher would say. This is a huge achievement for both the Bank of England and the government, because government policy can spike inflation. And what Rishi Sunak could have done, and what's actually been quite difficult and what he would say, is that there are parts of the public services and parts of the economy that the government would have wanted to spend more money in, but if they did, that would have spiked inflation. Because inflation at its core is too much money chasing too few goods. We had the pandemic, we had the energy crisis after the war in Ukraine, and now things are back to normal. We are also seeing wages now outstripping inflation, which means that people will start to feel better off. That doesn't mean that living costs aren't still too high. They are. But the economic picture has improved, and I think all parties should just rejoice at that news.
OK, let's just hear Rishi Sunak speaking on LBC today. This is what he said.
It's very good news because the last few years have been really tough for everybody. I know that, and we've had lots of shocks, inflation putting up people's bills. But, you know, we've stuck to a plan. We've taken the action. Wasn't always easy, but we've got there.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Inflation has fallen, but the rest of the country is still struggling. How can you, with your test, say that your plan is working?
Oh, well, Charlie, look, I know, as I said right at the beginning of the show, I know it's been a tough few years. Of course it has for you and everyone else. And when I got this job, my priority was to make sure we had economic stability. I said we'd halve inflation down from 11%. And obviously you saw today it's back to target at 2%. Wages are rising. And the most important thing I can do for you and everyone else to give you that financial security is keep cutting your taxes.
The problem is, Nicola, the food prices are 25% higher than they were 2 years ago. So they're not coming down.
No, they're not. It's amazing how they take responsibility when it's good news on inflation, but they deny responsibility when it's bad news.
But Albie says just rejoice.
Sure, I'm rejoicing that it's not as bad as it was and that it's not getting worse. But, you know, the question we're asking people is will it win the Tories your vote? And I just don't know that it will. I think that when you think inflation and Tories, you think of Liz Truss, you think of the mess that we got into.
Liz Truss didn't cause the inflation crisis.
No, but that's what people think of.
Did.
And that's exactly what people associate with the inflation crisis. And I just don't think they can wash their reputation with this good news
But that's
today.
because people on the left lie about Liz Truss causing the inflation crisis. She didn't help the inflation crisis by what she did with her mini-budget.
She caused an interest rate crisis.
But interest rates are actually up in the whole Western world because of the same factors, because a lot of governments and central banks are fighting inflation, and the way to do that is increase interest rates. Liz Truss wasn't in America. Liz Truss wasn't in Europe. Sure. Interest rates rose. The inflation crisis was caused by COVID and the energy crisis after Ukraine, and people on the left need to stop lying and saying that it was Liz Truss, because that's economically illiterate.
I understand your points on that, but you cannot deny that people will link it to the Tories.
But it's a lie.
No, I understand that. But
so do you tell your friends who say it's Liz Truss's fault, you're lying, stop doing it?
But isn't your argument like saying, you know, there was a car crash and Liz Truss drove a car over the cliff, but she wasn't responsible for breaking the gearbox because the gearbox was already broken? It's like the whole car went off a cliff. Albie, everything broke.
I know that my friends whose mortgages have gone up by several £100s a month, my friends whose rent has gone up, whether or not it's an individual who is responsible, they will look ultimately at the party who are in power the last 14 years of government and blame them.
But similarly,
and that's
Nicola,
understandable.
At that point, Nicola, you have to give them credit then for today's news, right?
Can someone explain to me how they should be given credit? Financial stability? He wasn't as mad as Liz Truss. Like, what has Rishi Sunak personally been responsible for bringing down inflation to 2%?
He has overseen the economy after an extremely tricky period where he tackled a pandemic, where he tackled an energy crisis, partially paid people's energy bills for over a year, partially paid people's wages.
But what has he done and how would that be different to Labour?
Inflation. Well, I don't know that very much of it would have been that different to Labour.
And that's the point, right?
I maybe think it's too similar to Labour.
If we're putting it in the context of who you're going to vote for as a result of inflation coming down, if there's not really that much difference between what the Tories have done and what Labour would do, then I don't think it's going to be a vote winner.
What I think is, of this, the Bank of England is independent and they make their own decisions and all that. I mean, the power they've got, because what they could do is they might say to themselves, OK, we can now cut 1% off interest rates. That'll be great for your mates with their mortgages.
Yeah.
But why don't we wait until after the election to do it?
That's exactly what they're doing.
Well, I didn't want to suggest that because, I mean, Andrew Bailey, for all I know, is apolitical. But it's possible he thinks this would be a massive boost to a government. Why would we want to give that to the Conservatives? You think they're doing that anyway?
Well, I believe I heard the Bank of England, one of the reasons the Bank of England wasn't cutting interest rates at the most recent committee meeting was because there was probably going to be a general election. So I know that to be something which has already happened.
Let me just
that's not like an advantage to Labour or Tory. It's just a sort of
that's
that normally happens during the election period.
Paul in Greater Manchester, what do you think?
Hiya, Jeremy. I just wanted to say that I'm a working class person from the Red Wall seat of Bolton West. And the gentleman on the panel, obviously, he's what we call a posh person in Bolton. And he's probably got a lot more money than me.
Not far from you.
Why is he a posh person? Was he wearing this? Was he wearing a shirt with sleeves or what?
Well, he does what a lot of posh people do. They wear a little ring on their finger, but they wear
graduation
a ring on the little finger. Yeah, but posh people always wear rings on the little fingers. But I don't know how you can defend Liz Truss. That's what I wanted to say, because she crashed the economy, and I don't know how you can defend her. And all this about inflation, it's not feeding through to ordinary people like me. They can say it's come down, this, that and the other, but the prices are still expensive for people like me when we go to Aldi and other places.
Prices are not coming down. This is the key thing.
It's not going to wash.
No, inflation's coming down, but prices are still going up. Paul, thank you. We'll take more calls, and we've got a big queue on this. Eric in Northamptonshire, will you be back in with the Conservatives after this?
Oh, I'll still support Brexit. Good morning, everybody.
Still support Brexit?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I meant still be supporting Tories.
Well, that's sort of just tripped off your tongue there, Derek. Sounds like you've said that before.
Said what before?
I'll still be supporting Brexit.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes.
But does it make that much difference, Derek, this inflation rate, do you think?
I'm sure it does. I mean, I think the point I'd like to make is that the Conservatives claimed that they would reduce inflation to 2%, which is the government's target. They promised that and they've achieved it, and I think full marks to them for doing it. They do deserve our vote for that. And what would be frustrating is for another government like Labour to come in and say, oh, inflation's very low now, but they've done nothing to achieve it, and claiming credit for it. That's what I would be very annoyed about.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks so much. Christine in Staffordshire, hi.
Hi.
Do you think this is going to turn the election now?
No, I would sincerely hope not, especially your last caller's comments. I'm sorry, but core inflation is still around 3.5%, as I understand it, and prices in the shops are not coming down to reflect supposed 2% inflation. That is not happening. It's not what the public see. And can I also just pick you up on something, Jeremy, you said earlier?
Yes.
And that is the comment about we don't want Labour getting a large majority because they can do anything. Is that not exactly what the Tories did when Boris was in with an 80-seat majority? It's called democracy.
I wouldn't have used the phrase "we don't want Labour getting a large majority because they could do anything." So just to make that clear,
the implication was there.
Yes, for sure. I guess you in a healthy democracy you want there to be some semblance of an opposition, right? We've not been in my lifetime. We haven't been in a territory of a governing party getting 470 seats or whatever. But maybe you're right. Maybe it needs to happen.
That reflects the situation that we're in and how the people in the country are feeling.
Fair enough.
If this is what is being proposed and being talked about, quite frankly, I don't think it's going to be of that magnitude myself. However, I think it is democracy if the people vote for change and vote for a Labour Party, and we will have to wait and see. But the same thing happened with the Tory Party. When they get in with a huge majority, it's all right.
Yeah.
So why is it different for Labour?
We haven't seen that level of majority that we're talking about here in my lifetime. So you're talking about an 80-seat majority is nothing compared to what's being predicted now. But yeah, listen, let's not argue about it. I think we probably agree. It's we'll wait to see what the election brings.
We'll wait and see what the Democratic vote result is.
That's all right, but I think we're allowed to talk about it. Yeah, no, that's fine, but we are allowed to talk about it, Christine. I remember there was a minister who was in Thatcher's cabinet called Francis Pym, and he went on Question Time. And because there's a big majority for Thatcher predicted in 82, and he said, I don't think landslides make good governments.
Yes.
She just sacked him straight away.
And actually, I would argue that the Tory Lib Dem coalition government achieved more from 2010 to 2015 than the Conservatives did in a majority government after 2019.
Well, it destroyed the Lib Dems for 10 years, so if that's
good.
Part of it. Thanks, Christine. Carl in Leicestershire, hi.
Good morning, Mr. Vine. How are you, sir?
I'm fine. We're very, very formal. Yes, I'm fine, Carl. Thank you, Mr. Carl.
Mr. Carl.
What do you want? I don't know your surname. Yes, what do you want to say?
I'm totally in sync with the young gentleman on your panel.
Oh, you'll love that.
Doesn't happen very often.
Do you have a pinky ring, Carl?
Yes, have you got a ring on your little finger? Ring? That's already come up.
No, I've only got a wedding ring on, unfortunately.
I don't know where you were looking then. Yeah. Okay.
But I totally... the Conservatives have got everything right. I'm going down that line, 2%. I live in a small village in Leicestershire. I have a co-op and a one-stop, and I don't see this 25% increase in prices. I go down there, buy what I need, and you know what? It's totally in sync with what I earn.
Right, so you're still working. You're not a pensioner, Carl. You've got a job.
Yes, £27,000 a year, night driver.
27 grand, and you can live on that in the village in Leicestershire without a problem.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the other thing is, Jeremy, if I may call you Jeremy.
You may. Of course you can.
Yes, my son-in-law and daughter pay for 2 kids to go to a public school.
Okay.
£51,000 a year. They released 2 places in the state system, so they pay that, and then Mr. Starmer wants to VAT them.
Yeah. Is that bad, do you think?
That is totally wrong.
Well, listen, thank you, Carl. It's really nice to connect. That's a whole thing that's coming down the track.
Sure.
We're going to see what happens with that.
The private schools, of course, don't have to pass that on.
But they will.
I understand that some will in some ways. They don't have to pass on the whole thing. I'm just really interested what Carl said there about the Tories have got everything right. Can anyone honestly believe that, Albie, even you?
I don't believe that. But I do believe that Carl is the best caller I've ever heard on this show.
Yeah, totally honest about his numbers.
Totally agreed with me.
Night driver.
And
very safe.
He is clearly an example of someone who is able to look after their own money. He has children and a child-in-law who have obviously been quite socially mobile and now able to afford to send their children to a private school.
But Nicola says he's wrong about everything.
Well, he's not wrong about everything.
Well,
I think he's an honourable man.
Well, that's not. But you can be honourable and wrong.
He's not wrong about everything. I've got a lot of respect for Carl.
Okay, but Carl did say the Conservatives have got everything right.
And I would say that is not true.
This is brilliant. Great calls on this. We might even keep going after the break. Pete in Nottinghamshire, hi.
Hi, good morning, panel.
It's obviously the day when everyone says how much they're earning, so feel free if you want to follow Carl.
Yeah, well, I've got a pension little one, so that's all I've got. I've got a question for Albie.
Hello.
Yeah.
You talk about Tories taking credit for bringing inflation down. I never heard them taking the blame for it when it went up. Explain that to me.
So I would argue that the reason we had inflation is because of lockdown policy, which was something which the government implemented. So the government does have to take some blame there. Global governments around the world do. And also an exogenous shock, which was the Ukraine war and the energy crisis which followed. So, yeah, the government does have a part to play in inflation.
Should they not give a massive...
Have you ever heard them explain that they've had a part to play and say it's our fault that inflation went up? Because I haven't.
No, I haven't heard that, Pete. I haven't heard it. I do think if you're the government, you're in charge of everything. So Labour have got to take responsibility for the financial crisis of 2008. Conservatives for inflation.
Equally, at the time of the pandemic, when the government was locking down, when the government was paying everyone's wages, no one complained. People wanted them to go longer and harder. Okay. So we all have a part to play in this. It was public opinion that swayed the government.
We'll take some more calls on this after the break. We're live on Channel 5, also live on My5. Hey, listen, so what we're talking about, because I get so many calls on this, is whether the inflation rate, which is down now to 2%-ish, whether it makes you think, OK, I'm going to vote Conservative. I'm going to add something into the mix now before we take our next calls, which is I've just heard that yesterday was the highest number of small boat crossings so far this year. 882 people in a day. Dave in Lancaster, where does that leave you?
Where does what leave me, Jeremy?
Well, inflation, good. Boat crossings, not good.
Well, as far as boat crossings are concerned, I think we have to think about tackling the problem where it originates from and stopping it there. But, of course, that causes all sorts of other problems, so I don't think they'll ever do that.
Well, that effectively is the Labour policy, isn't it? Is that you go in and you find out whoever's buying these boats and selling tickets, and you just, spread eagle them over the bonnet of a Ford Fiesta or whatever and put them somewhere where the sun don't shine.
Yeah, but that's just in France. You've got to tackle this at source. You've got to go into the countries where this originates from.
Oh, we haven't
where
got
these
time for
people are
that.
being driven from. I mean,
no, yeah, I know, but that's listen. We've had to.
These people are all these people who are in abject poverty and can't afford to buy food suddenly come up with God knows how many thousands of pounds to put them on a boat. It seems very
but they're in. Listen, we've got to have some compassion here. Dave, they've got terrible lives going on. The reason I reacted is we did go into Iraq and Afghanistan to make life better for the people in those countries. The result seems to be it got so bad that a lot of them want to come here. So us going around the world trying to sort other countries out hasn't worked in the past.
Yeah, no, true. But anyway, inflation. What's inflation? Yeah. It's just another word for greed, Jeremy.
OK, why do you say that?
Well, because big business basically controls the purse.
I'm with you. Yeah.
The Rishi Sunak's controlled by people who are a much higher pay grade than he is.
Well, he's richer than the king.
Sorry?
Dave, go on. Albie's coming in, Dave.
Could you take your tinfoil hat off?
Oh, Albie.
Rishi Sunak is not controlled by some corporate greedy people and causing inflation because of that. I have explained why we have inflation at the moment very accurately. You can ask any economist. What I have said is right. Are you not happy that inflation is now down at 2%, which is the Bank of England's target?
We'll leave the question hanging because I'm going to go to Alan in Leicestershire. Alan in Leicestershire, are you happy with it?
I'm very happy with 2%.
And are you voting Conservative as a result?
I will be, but I've always voted Conservative because I believe they're the only party who can do good for this country. I am 84.
Alan, how do you...
Nicola's literally reacted.
I've got to ask, from what they've done over the past 14 years and the state that the country is in at the moment, you still believe that they are the party to take the country through to better times ahead?
I go back to the 13 years that Tony Blair was in charge. He came in 1997 on a rise in prosperity. Gordon Brown couldn't get enough money. He sold our gold. In 2008, he changed.
How is it, Alan? I'm going to make this a little bit more personal. How has your life changed over the past 14 years? Do you feel better off or worse off than you were 14 years ago?
That doesn't come into it, dear. Okay. The thing is, when the country went bust in 2010, that was down to Gordon Brown.
Sure. But in the past 14 years, do you feel better off or worse off than then?
I don't think
nobody talks about that.
All right, Alan, thank you. We're going to have to move on, but thank you. I think Alan's prosperity does come into it, actually. OK, next we're talking about the Reform Party.